What happens when you strip away Hollywood glamour and lock actors in a real military prison under the scorching sun? There's your lovely glass house, Sergeant Major. There's your lovely glass house. The Hill wasn't just a war movie. It was a brutal experiment in human endurance disguised as cinema. While other films of the 1960s painted war with romantic brushstrokes, director Sidney Lumet trapped Sean Connery and his fellow actors inside an actual military detention camp in the Spanish desert, where temperatures soared past 120 degrees. Tempers erupted like grenades, and the line between performance and survival blurred beyond recognition. The production became its own prison. Actors collapsed. Connery nearly walked off set permanently. The studio demanded changes that Lumet refused to make, and what emerged from that furnace wasn't entertainment. It was testimony. Here are 20 weird facts about The Hill that reveal how one of cinema's most uncompromising films almost destroyed everyone who made it. And stick around for the bonus fact, a detail so disturbing that it was hidden from audiences for decades. Let's climb. Sean Connery fled James Bond to prove he could actually act. Fresh off Goldfinger, Sean Connery didn't just want to escape Bond, he needed to. The tuxedo had become a straitjacket. So when Sidney Lumet offered him the role of Joe Roberts, a broken soldier in a military prison, Connery signed on before reading the entire script. Not for the money, not for the prestige, but because Lumet promised him something Hollywood had denied him, the chance to be ugly, beaten, and real. Connery accepted a fraction of his Bond salary. He shaved his head. He refused makeup. On the first day of filming, standing in that prison yard, Connery told Lumet, "This is the first time I've felt like an actor in years." The performance would prove Bond was the illusion. Roberts was the truth. They filmed in an actual military prison that still held prisoners. The production didn't build a set. They occupied one. The film's location was a functioning military detention facility outside Almeria, Spain, a real prison with real guards and real inmates watching from their cells as cameras rolled. Lumet chose it specifically because he wanted authenticity that set designers couldn't manufacture. The walls weren't painted concrete. They were sun-bleached stone that had absorbed decades of punishment. The cell doors scraped with genuine rust. The isolation rooms still smelled of sweat and desperation. During breaks, actors could hear actual prisoners shouting from nearby blocks. Ian Bannon later recalled, "We weren't acting in a prison. We were temporarily imprisoned actors." The Spanish military remained on site throughout filming, a constant reminder that the suffering wasn't metaphorical. The Hill itself was a torture device built to Sidney Lumet's exact specifications. That sand-covered mountain at the film's center wasn't a natural formation. It was engineered cruelty. Lumet commissioned construction crews to build an artificial hill 60 feet high at a 45-degree angle, then covered it with loose sand and gravel designed to shift underfoot. The incline was scientifically calculated to be the maximum slope a human could climb while carrying weight without mechanical assistance. Every step forward triggered a half-step backward. The Hill became the film's true antagonist, an inanimate object that defeated men through simple physics. Stunt coordinators tested it first. After 3 climbs, they reported muscle failure and heat exhaustion. Lumet smiled. "Perfect," he said. "That's exactly what I want the audience to feel." Temperatures reached 126 degrees Fahrenheit. During filming, the Spanish desert didn't just provide atmosphere. It provided punishment. Shooting took place during July and August, when Almeria transforms into a convection oven. The production weather log recorded temperatures exceeding 126 degrees Fahrenheit on multiple days. The sand became so hot that crew members couldn't walk on it without boots. Camera equipment required constant cooling with wet towels to prevent malfunction. Film stock warped in its canisters. Makeup melted off actors' faces within minutes, which actually served Lumet's vision. He wanted them drenched in authentic sweat, not glycerin. The heat wasn't an obstacle to overcome. It was a collaborator. Lumet scheduled the most brutal scenes for the hottest hours deliberately, believing the sun would extract performances that direction alone couldn't. Sean Connery collapsed on set and refused medical evacuation. During the filming of the third hill running sequence, Connery went down hard. Not theatrically, actually collapsed. His legs buckled mid-climb, and he tumbled backward down the slope, unconscious, before he hit bottom. The production medic diagnosed severe dehydration and heat stroke, recommending immediate hospital transport. Connery regained consciousness and refused, not out of machismo, but out of commitment to something larger than himself. He'd watched crew members and fellow actors suffer the same conditions without complaint. To leave felt like betrayal, After 20 minutes in the shade and 2 liters of water, Connery returned to the hill. Lumet tried to send him back to the hotel. Connery's response became legendary among the cast. "If Roberts can take it, so can I." He completed the scene in 1 take. The cast trained in a real military prison boot camp. 2 weeks before cameras rolled, Lumet sent his entire cast to a British military detention facility for immersion training. Not method acting classes. Actual incarceration simulation. They woke at for 500 hours. They ate prison rations. They followed orders from real military police instructors who treated them not as actors, but as inmates. They ran punishment drills. They slept in cells. They experienced the psychological erosion that military prison inflicts, the systematic stripping of identity, the manufactured helplessness, the casual cruelty disguised as discipline. Hendry later described it as the most valuable and horrible education of my career. When they arrived in Spain, they didn't need to pretend to fear authority. The fear had been installed. The boot camp wasn't preparation for roles. It was the destruction of the actors themselves, leaving only the characters behind. Sidney Lumet banned all chairs from the set. Lumet implemented a rule that cast and crew found baffling until they understood its purpose. No chairs anywhere on location. Not for actors. Not for department heads. Not even for Lumet himself. Everyone stood or sat on the ground. The prohibition wasn't arbitrary cruelty. It was environmental psychology. Lumet believed that comfort breeds detachment, and he needed everyone from lead actors to gaffer assistants to remain physically uncomfortable throughout production. The moment someone relaxed into a chair, they exited the prison. Stand long enough in the heat, and exhaustion becomes your natural state. Sit on hot sand, and you understand humiliation. By eliminating the possibility of comfort, Lumet eliminated the possibility of pretense. The set wasn't a workplace. It was a shared ordeal. The script contained almost no action, just men talking and breaking. The Hill commits what Hollywood executives considered commercial death. Nothing explodes, nobody gets shot, and the closest thing to action is men running up a slope. The entire film consists of conversations, confrontations, and psychological disintegration. Ray Rigby's screenplay was adapted from his own stage play, and Lumet refused to open it up, with the conventional edition studios demanded no flashbacks to combat, no romantic subplots, no escape attempts. Just imprisonment, just waiting, just the slow-motion violence of institutional power crushing human dignity. United Artists executives read the script and demanded changes. Lumet declined every note. They threatened to replace him. He offered to walk. They backed down, but slashed the budget. Lumet accepted. The film's power comes precisely from what it refuses to show it. Forces audiences to confront men stripped of everything except their breaking points. Ossie Davis rewrote his own character to add racial dimension. Ossie Davis arrived in Spain and recognized something absent from the script. His character, Jacko King, had no racial identity. In a film about power and hierarchy and institutional cruelty, the only black prisoner remained colorless on the page. Davis approached Lumet and pitched a radical revision, not dialogue changes, but a complete recontextualization of King's experience through the lens of racism. Lumet, to his credit, didn't just accept the idea. He collaborated. Together they crafted moments where King's race becomes subtext, the way guards watch him differently, the way other prisoners position themselves around him, the way authority treats his resistance as inherently more threatening. Davis didn't announce these changes. He embodied them. The result is a performance of quiet fury, where every line carries double weight. King doesn't discuss racism. He endures it. And Davis makes you see it without a single explanatory speech. The film was banned by military organizations worldwide. Upon release, The Hill didn't just face criticism from military establishments. It faced active suppression. The British Ministry of Defense discouraged screenings on or near military bases. The U.S. Department of Defense denied cooperation for any future projects involving the film's producers. Veterans organizations in 6 countries issued formal complaints about the film's depiction of military justice, not because the events were false, but because they were true. The film exposed what military prisons actually were, not rehabilitation centers, but breaking yards. Several retired officers admitted privately that the film's depiction was uncomfortably accurate. But public condemnation remained fierce. The military didn't fear the film was a lie. They feared it was testimony, and they couldn't allow testimony. The ban wasn't censorship. It was self-protection. Go ahead and like and subscribe, because what comes next gets even darker, including the real-world punishment that one actor endured because of his performance. Ian Hendry's method. Performance nearly destroyed his career. Ian Hendry played Staff Sergeant Williams, the sadistic guard whose cruelty drives the film's horror. To prepare, Hendry studied transcripts from military prison abuse investigations. He interviewed former guards who admitted to psychological torture. And then, on set, he refused to break character between takes. For 6 weeks, Hendry remained Williams cold, authoritarian, cruel. Cast members began avoiding him. Crew members stopped making eye contact. The isolation was intentional. Hendry believed Williams's power came from his separateness, his inability to connect. But when filming wrapped, Hendry couldn't stop. The character had colonized him. He returned to London withdrawn, suspicious, prone to sudden anger. His marriage collapsed. Directors stopped calling. Hendry later admitted to self-medicating with substances, trying to drown Williams. It took 2 years and professional help before Hendry felt like himself again. He'd given an unforgettable performance. It had cost him everything. The film's ending was reshot after test audiences demanded justice. Lumet's original ending was bleaker than what audiences saw. In the first cut, Sergeant Major Wilson, played by Harry Andrews, suffers no consequences for his actions. He remains in command. The system protects him. Justice fails completely. Test audiences in New York revolted, not because they disliked the film, but because they couldn't accept the moral void at its conclusion. United Artists insisted on changes. Lumet resisted, arguing that Hollywood endings betrayed the film's truth. The studio threatened to replace him in the editing room. Eventually, a compromise emerged. The film suggests, but doesn't show, that Wilson might face consequences. It's ambiguous enough to preserve Lumet's vision, while providing audiences a thread of hope. But Lumet never forgave himself for the change. In interviews decades later, he called it his only significant artistic compromise, and maintained that the original ending was the honest one. Sean Connery credited this film for saving him from being typecast forever. Years after The Hill, Connery reflected that this film, not his later prestigious roles, proved he was more than Bond. The performance shattered the assumption that he was merely a charismatic presence, revealing depth that casting directors had ignored. Offers changed. Scripts arrived that required acting, not posing. Directors like John Huston and Sidney Lumet himself returned with complex roles. But beyond career impact, Connery credited the film with personal transformation. The physical suffering, the emotional exposure, the willingness to be ugly, these weren't acting techniques. They were discoveries about his own capacity for truth. In a 1983 interview, Connery said, "Bond made me famous. Roberts made me an actor." The statement wasn't bitterness toward Bond. It was gratitude toward Lumet for demanding more than Hollywood typically asked. The film featured 0 women, a deliberate artistic choice. The Hill contains not a single female character. No nurses, no flashbacks to wives, no photographs. Nothing. The absence was intentional. Lumet wanted to create a hermetically sealed masculine environment, where the only relationships were between men and power, men and authority, men and institutional violence. The prison becomes a petri dish for examining how hierarchy functions in the absence of any civilizing presence. Critics accused the film of misogyny for excluding women entirely. Lumet countered that their absence was the point. These men exist in a world that has removed every human connection, except brutality. The film doesn't celebrate this environment. It condemns it, but condemnation requires showing the thing itself, uninterrupted. Including women would have provided escape valves, moments of tenderness that these prisoners didn't have access to. The exclusion wasn't about women. It was about the suffocating totality of institutional control. Alfred Lynch suffered actual injuries that became part of the film. Alfred Lynch played George Stevens, the weak-hearted prisoner whose death anchors the film's moral center. During production, Lynch sustained multiple real injuries: bruised ribs from falls, heat-related illness, friction burns from the sand that medics treated between takes. But instead of stopping production or using a double, Lumet incorporated Lynch's genuine suffering into the performance. Stevens' weakness isn't acted. It's real. Lynch's exhaustion wasn't makeup or technique. It was physiology. The scene where Stevens collapses on the hill features actual collapse, Lynch's body giving out under conditions it couldn't sustain. Lumet kept cameras rolling. The moment became the film's emotional climax. Lynch later called it the most honest work I've ever done, while also admitting it nearly ended me. The performance required no imagination. It required survival, and barely. The film was shot in only 30 days with no studio oversight. United Artists, having cut the budget and distrusted the project, essentially abandoned The Hill during production. No studio executives visited the set. No daily reviews of footage. Lumet had complete autonomy, rare for any director in 1965. Unprecedented for a film starring Sean Connery. The compressed 30-day schedule was partly financial necessity, partly creative strategy. Lumet believed the intensity couldn't sustain longer production. Exhaustion would become their enemy, rather than their tool. So he shot fast, often completing complex sequences in single takes, trusting his actors' preparation and the oppressive environment to generate authentic performances. The gamble worked. The film feels immediate, raw, unrehearsed. But the cost was human. Several crew members required medical treatment. 2 actors developed lasting health complications, and Lumet himself admitted to working in a state of controlled mania, sleeping 3 hours per night, editing in his head while shooting. The speed wasn't efficiency. It was escape finishing before anyone collapsed permanently. Harry Andrews' performance was based on his own military service trauma. Harry Andrews, playing the authoritarian Sergeant Major Wilson, drew directly from his Royal Artillery service during World War II, but not from pride or patriotism. From trauma. Andrews had witnessed military discipline cross into abuse. He'd seen officers use regulations as weapons. He'd watched institutional power corrupt decent men into torturers. Wilson isn't a villain. He's what the system produces: a man who believes cruelty is duty, punishment is love, and breaking prisoners is professional excellence. Andrews played him without irony or judgment, which made the performance more disturbing. Wilson believes he's right, and Andrews understood that belief from the inside. After filming, Andrews told Lumet, "I played men I served under, men I feared, men who damaged me." The admission explained why Wilson feels so chillingly authentic. He isn't a character. He's Andrews' ghosts, finally given form. The film's cinematographer designed lighting to simulate interrogation techniques. Cinematographer Oswald Morris approached The Hill not as a war film, but as a psychological horror film. His lighting design deliberately recreated interrogation aesthetics: harsh overhead lights that eliminate shadows and hiding places, glaring sunlight that makes prisoners squint and submit, darkness that swallows identity. Morris studied how military interrogators use light as a weapon, then translated those techniques into cinema. Notice how characters are almost never evenly lit. Authority figures are backlit, their faces obscured. Prisoners are overlit, their every expression exposed. The cinematography doesn't observe the prison, it imprisons the audience. Morris wanted viewers to feel the same visual claustrophobia that inmates experience. The camera positions are low, rarely offering escape to sky or horizon. Every frame traps you. The lighting isn't beautiful. It's tactical. Morris didn't illuminate the film. He weaponized light itself. The film's sound design eliminated all music to force audience discomfort. The Hill has no musical score. None. Not even over the end credits. The decision was radical for 1965, when orchestral scores were standard. Lumet insisted on absolute aural realism, only the sounds that would actually exist in that environment. Footsteps on sand, labored breathing, distant shouting, the scrape of metal doors, wind across stone. The absence of music removes emotional guidance. Audiences can't rely on swelling strings to tell them how to feel. They're left alone with the brutality, forced to form their own emotional responses without Hollywood's usual manipulation. Test audiences found the silence disturbing. That was the point. Silence is what prison sounds like. Silence is what institutional violence sounds like. The film doesn't score the action because the action speaks for itself. And what it says doesn't need orchestration. It needs witness. Sidney Lumet considered it his most important film above all his later masterpieces. Lumet directed 12 Angry Men, Dog Day Afternoon, Network, the verdict films that defined American cinema. But when asked late in life which work mattered most, he named The Hill, not because it was perfect, because it was necessary. Lumet believed the film revealed something audiences needed to see: how systems crush individuals, how authority becomes cruelty, how institutions protect themselves at human cost. These themes would recur throughout his career, but never with the raw force of The Hill. The film succeeded because it failed at entertainment. It didn't please, it confronted. Lumet considered it his artistic manifesto, the work that established he would never prioritize comfort over truth. Everything he made afterward traced back to that Spanish prison, that artificial hill, those 6 weeks of controlled suffering. The Hill wasn't just his most important film. It was his declaration of purpose, and he never retreated from it. The Hill remains uncompromising, unforgiving, and unwatchable for many audiences. Not because it's poorly made, but because it's too well made. It delivers exactly what Lumet promised. The truth about institutional violence, filmed without mercy or relief. The suffering you see on screen wasn't simulated. It was endured. And that's what makes the film impossible to dismiss. You can't call it exploitation when the people making it subjected themselves to the same conditions. You can't call it exaggeration when the actors carry visible proof of their ordeal. The Hill isn't entertainment. It's testimony delivered at tremendous human cost. If this video gave you a new appreciation for what these actors endured, hit that like button and subscribe for more behind-the-scenes stories that reveal what really happens when cinema demands everything. And remember, some films aren't made, they're survived.